Hi, welcome to the UPS store.
Yeah, I'd like to ship this package.
Great, I can help you with that and every other ing.
Did you just say every other ing?
Printing, packing, copying, faxing, freighting, any ing your small business needs.
Shredding.
Yep.
Mailboxing.
Uh-huh.
Notarizing?
That too.
Wow, that's really some ing.
Now you're getting it.
The UPS Store. Every ing for small business. And of course, shipping. The UPS Store franchise locations are independently owned and operated. Services, pricing, and hours may vary. See Center for details.
This is a CBC podcast.
Well, 4 years ago, Nova Scotia's Auditor General made several recommendations to the Department of Lands and Forestry to help protect endangered species in our province. A report out yesterday concludes the department still hasn't completed those tasks. No surprise to Jamie Simpson and Bob Bancroft. They're both part of a team that successfully took the province to court last year for failing to protect species at risk. Jamie Simpson is a lawyer with Juniper Law, and Bob Bancroft is a wildlife biologist. Welcome back to the program, both of you.
Good morning.
Morning.
Good morning. Well, Jamie, remind us briefly about the court case and the outcome of that.
Yeah, we launched the court case. The applicants launched the court case in January of 2019, and by May of 2020, that's last May, the end of May, Justice Brothers with the Supreme Court of Nova Scotia released her decision and found that the Department of Lands and Forestry had failed to meet its legal obligations under the Endangered Species Act for the 6 representative species that we brought forward. And those 6 species kind of represented all of the various shortcomings, the various failures to meet their obligations with respect to a number of species that are endangered or threatened in Nova Scotia.
And the 6 species, you call them representative endangered species because, as you say there, they stand for a number of endangered species, but you had to choose 6.
Yeah, there were so many that it would have been too burdensome to try to bring them all forward. So we chose 6 that kind of represented the broad suite of failures under the Act.
And specifically, how did the judge find that the province had failed to comply with the Endangered Species Act?
Well, for example, with the mainland moose, they found that Justice Brothers found that the department had failed to identify areas of potential core habitat for mainland moose, which it was supposed to have done. A number of years ago, back in 2007. It should have been done in 2004, but they were delayed in getting the management plan prepared until 2007. But at any rate, it long overdue. The Rams Head Lady Slipper, for example, it should have had a recovery team and a recovery plan by 2008. And of course, when we launched the case, that hadn't been done. So over a decade in default there. So it just some of the examples: no recovery teams, no recovery plans. Sometimes core habitat not identified. It's a long list.
Yeah, and the judge ordered the province to fulfill its legal obligations with respect to those species that you mentioned, the 6 that were identified. Was there any specifics around when that had to be done? The fulfilling of those legal obligations falling in line with the court order?
No, Justice Brothers declined to assign a timeline to the completion. So it's been over a year. It's been about 14 months now since the decision was released, and we've heard through the grapevine that maybe some of the requirements of the court order have been fulfilled, and then some haven't. But we haven't heard anything specifically from the Department of Lands and Forestry about any progress that they may have made in fulfilling the court order. And 14 months, you'd think that we'd at least get an update,
like some sort of progress report.
One would hope.
Well, Bob, what do you think about the fact that we really don't know where the province is after failing to comply?
Well, it makes a farce of this whole business of transparency. I mean, I asked the director of wildlife if I could speak with some of the new staff they have regarding species at risk. Portia, and he advised me not to, and said there would be regular updates, which there aren't. And of course, these animals can't speak. the judge said, what do you expect to bring a moose into the courtroom when they tried to throw us out as not being representative of the species, and there's a real issue here in the woods. And Jamie brought up the moose issue. I think it's there are a lot of little things that need attention too. But for example, the mainland moose, the Extinction Rebellion people, the Nature Nova Scotia. There was a real effort last year. We identified moose in the western part of the province, but in Digby County and other counties, and as core habitat, and sent this to the government, and they ignored it. So what we've really got here, the mainland moose was declared in 2003. It's 18 years later, and these animals, they're still cutting down the habitat. And I mentioned moose because, quite frankly, this is a government that takes its orders, as near as I can tell. If you're an endangered species, they take their orders from the forest industry. And the forest industry wants to continue cutting even where they know there are moose. And they're doing it all over the place where there are few moose left. And they're not being restrained by the department.
And we talked about the timeline, the 4 years that have passed, the Auditor General's report saying that the Department of Lands and Forestry doesn't have recovery plans, or there's a lack of specifics in them, and recovery teams for species at risk. And why are those two significant when it comes to making real change, protecting species at risk that have been identified that way?
Well, you've got to have a group of people that know a little bit about the subject matter in order to be able to move forward. And a management plan simply identifies where these species are and what and identifies options for setting them aside. For example, with the black ash, we know where there are black ash in the province, and they could go ahead and do some negotiating if it's on private land. So these are logical steps that you need a recovery team and you need a management plan, and they're just being ignored.
And what are the options legally, I suppose, Jamie, if the province doesn't respond to the judge's order?
Right. Well, we'd hate to have to, drag the department back to court and launch another suit here. But I suppose that would be an ultimate option here is to return to court and to file a new court case against them.
That sounds expensive and would take some time as the clock is ticking, though, Jamie?
Exactly. Yes, it's an unfortunate situation that the department is not at least providing an update on their progress.
And Bob, when we were talking about endangered species, these are animals and plants that are in danger of becoming extinct. How long do you think the province has to act before it is too late for these species, as we're talking here this morning about timelines?
I fear the tipping points for a lot of species are coming pretty quickly. From several scientific studies indicate and show, including the landscape aspect of the province, satellite images, that about half of this province has been clear cut. You don't clear cut healthy forests and wind up with moonscapes. And have a healthy population. The forest is too drastic a change for animals. So Portia, I fear that many of these species, there are lots of people fighting, and I think the government has got to take the interests of the people in mind and the animals that share this province, and we've got to go ahead, and we're going to keep pushing to do so because they're ignoring what's happening, and they've overcut the province, and it's just I'm not going to let it sit. We're going to keep fighting.
Well, There is an election coming up as well, and I can well imagine what your questions on the doorstep will be to candidates who show up there. Bob, Jamie, thanks very much for taking the time this morning to talk about where this situation sits and next steps.
Thank you, Portia.
That's Bob Bancroft, a wildlife biologist. Jamie Simpson is a lawyer with Juniper Law in Halifax.
For more CBC podcasts, go to cbc.ca/podcasts.